Okay, I can see the numbers are still rising, but I'm going to get started because we are pressed for time. My name's Jeremy Deere. I'm Deputy General Secretary of the International Federation of Journalists, which represents around 600,000 journalists in 190 national trade unions and associations in 141 countries. We're proud that the NUJ was not only one of our founding unions back in 1926, but that it remains today one of the IFJ's most active and influential unions. On behalf of all the IFJ affiliates, let me thank NUJ members, branches, NEC members, officials, Michelle, Seamus and the parliamentary group for the inspirational and vital work that you do to stand up for journalists and journalism, not just in the UK and Ireland, but across the globe. And a huge thank you too for your contributions to the IFJ's International Safety Fund, which provides emergency support to journalists in danger and under threat. It's a concrete example of your internationalism and your solidarity. And that solidarity could not be more important than it is today, at a time when the killings of journalists happen not just in war-torn countries, but are deliberate and systematic, designed to silence independent voices and investigative journalism, at a time when more than 230 journalists are in jail around the world, at a time when journalists face arrest for exposing crime and government corruption, at a time when fake news laws, sedition and criminal defamation are used to silence media, at a time when internet shutdowns, unlawful surveillance and online harassment target journalists, at a time when hedge funds, venture capital funds and corporate interests asset strip our media or government staff public broadcasters, leading to job cuts, worsening conditions and quality journalism being undermined. And above all, at a time when, as we see today in Gaza, journalists and media are deliberately and systematically targeted by those who want to hide the truth. Our amazing panel of speakers today will shed more light on how such attacks are threatening independent journalism, but also about how unions are fighting back, demanding justice, standing up for independent journalism, jobs and decent work, and crucially, how you can help their fight. Sadly, they will each only have 6 minutes to do so in order to allow some time for you at the end to ask questions. Questions can be posted in the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen at any time, and I will try to cover as many as time allows. So let me first turn to Namibia. And the strike that has been taking place at Namibia Broadcasting Corporation, and welcome Sakeus, who is General Secretary of the Namibia Media Professionals Union, a union which was only founded last year and is the IFJ's newest affiliate. So welcome to you, Sakeus. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. You have 6 minutes. Tell us about the strike.
I have 6 minutes. I joined this meeting let me just get to a secure place. Yeah, I joined this meeting in the middle. I did not. I found you already introducing the meeting, I think.
Yeah.
And I did not really get the gist of the introduction, but if you want me to give an update on the NBC issue.
Yes, please.
I think majority of us on this platform have received a letter that is from the president today, which is
maybe Sakeus, because there will be a number of people in the meeting who do not know about the strike. You can describe why the people went on strike, what the issues are, because I think they will be similar for lots of people in public broadcasters around the world.
Yes, definitely. Yes, definitely. The employee of the NBC embarked on an industrial action on the 22nd of April. They have been for years demanding better working condition, better pay, and better and improved equipment. You know, the NBC is Namibia's only public broadcaster. It was founded in 1990 when Namibia got independence. And since then, the company or the corporation has adopted an old structure that was used by the former SABC. And basically, it has not done anything to improve the quality of the equipment, the quality of even the building, the structure. It has not been improved. Although government has been spending money on its operation. NBC basically currently depends on the government subsidy that comes every year. For the past 5 years, NBC has been receiving close to more than 340 million. But this year, the government reduced that subsidy to only 127 million.
Looks to me like Sakeus's internet has frozen, which that for those of us who do these international solidarity meetings every day of the week know that this is a frequent occurrence and a professional obstacle sometimes to running them. What I'll do is I will move on and I'll come back to Sakeus in the hope that his connection is he's back. If you unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself, Sakeus?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, as I was saying, the issue of the NBC is not a new issue. It's an issue that is coming from years of, for example, for the past 5 years, NBC employees have basically been complaining about their tax contribution, medical aid contribution, and all other pension contribution not being paid over to the revenue authorities and all these other things. So these are quite issues that has persisted at the NBC, and issues that has persisted at the NBC, and that is what has caused employees to go on strike. We have, of course, over the course of last month and this month, been requesting the government to intervene and bring about a solution to the issue of the NBC. As I was saying at the beginning, that most of us on this platform has received a letter of response to our massive submission to the Office of the President to intervene in the issue. We have seen the content of the President. He is basically taking a backseat. And we feel that perhaps we must allow because this issue of the NBC is now in the court, we should perhaps allow the court to finalize the issue and then take it from there to see where we can, how we can resolve this matter. Jeremy?
Yep. Okay, so thank you very much for that, Sakeus. And I think what we have done on the IFJ behalf is to send a model letter to all of our affiliates all around the world, asking them to write to the government, and they did in good numbers. If you think it would be useful that we continue to do that, we could ask branches of unions like the NUJ to also begin to send those letters to put more pressure on the government to try and resolve this dispute.
Yes, definitely. As I was saying, that this issue is now currently in court. There was a hearing today in the High Court of Namibia. So we are still awaiting that outcome of the court. And if it's favorable, then we move forward. But if it's not favorable, then we report back and say, no, this is where we stand. This is how we want the IFJ to support us again going forward.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and I'm sure that the IFJ and the NUJ will be ready to support you if you need further support, and we wish you luck with the outcome of that court action, because I know many of the issues you've talked about underfunding of public broadcasting will be ones that are recognised by people all over the world, and certainly lots of NUJ members, as there are cuts at the BBC as well. So thank you. Next, let us go to Turkey and talk to Ayse, who was one of those journalists jailed for her part in standing up for independent journalism. Her and her union have been at the forefront of fighting for media freedom in a country which has become one of the worst jailers of journalists, and in which thousands of journalists have been fired, arrested, and harassed. Ayse, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Hello, I'll try to be very brief. Well, there are many establishments who hold the track of the number of journalists who are in jail.
Ayse, your connection is a little poor.
No, is that better now, like that?
That's better.
Can you hear me?
That's better.
Okay.
Yes.
But it is around 40 now, but the numbers and names are constantly changing. One person goes in and goes out, so it's never clear. There are a few.
Sorry, I'm not sure if everyone else is having the same problem with hearing that. I think we need to try and sort out that problem. Let me move on, and we'll come back to you, Ayse, in a minute. So let's go to India and speak to Sabina Inderjit, who is Secretary General of the Indian Journalists Union and also Vice President of the International Federation of Journalists, to shed some light on the increasingly hostile situation facing Indian journalists, not just with the siege of Kashmir, but the use of sedition laws, a growing COVID toll, and increasingly authoritarian government cracking down on media freedom and threatening media professionals. Sabina, welcome. Over to you. You're muted.
Yes. All right. So, just a moment. So, I'm going to begin by saying that India boasts of being the largest democracy in the world, but developments in the past few years makes us actually introspect as journalists and citizens about whether the institutions of democracy are optimally functional, including the fourth estate. This nagging uncertainty is largely aided by a populist far-right government, which wants more and more control. The media has never been tested before, and that's really a fact today, with the government pressure on journalists the highest since we had the emergency way back in 1975-77. It was declared as an emergency. But today what we feel and what we sense is that there seems to be an undeclared emergency where the media is being targeted. While some media and journalists have stood tall against the pressure of a more vindictive regime, unfortunately, the other side of it is that many have not, and some have even crawled when asked to bend. One of the most blunt instruments used against the media and activists by the government is the sweeping, archaic, and chilling Sedition Law, which authorities have used to bludgeon free speech and journalism. Making criticism of the government is an act against India, or as oft heard now from the government, be it the state government or the central government, you are branded as anti-national. The Sedition Law is under section 124A of the Indian Penal Code, wherein it says whether it's words, whether it's written, it's a spoken word, or it's signs or visible representation, or attempts or brings attempts to bring in hatred or contempt, or incites or attempts to excite disaffection towards the government, it shall be punished with imprisonment, and not just imprisonment, could be for life, with an additional aspect of a fine being imposed. Now, this is not just the law of sedition. We have the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and now we also have the National Security Act, which are acts seen as anti-terror acts, which have been used against journalists. These laws, actually, what they're doing is not only bringing about a fear psychosis amongst the journalist fraternity, but what they're doing is they're tying up journalists and others in legal nightmares. And as these laws allow easy detention, in the UPA and even in the National Security Act, there is no question of a bail being given, a very chilling effect on free speech indeed. And while I would say that today journalists across the country are facing intimidation and harassment by governments which have become very, very intolerant to criticism, Kashmir, I must deal with it as well, is worse off, because I think while we in the rest of the country are able to really report from the ground, our colleagues in Kashmir are being denied that kind of freedom of reporting from the ground, and restrictions have been imposed on them. And this has happened more specifically after August 2019, when the BJP government, it threatened to remove the special status of Kashmir and revoked Article 370 and imposed president's rule. There was a complete communication clampdown. Jeremy, as you said, internet clampdown was there, and it lasted for over a year. This was the darkest times, I think, that the Valley's ever gone through. And I would say it was the worst time for our journalists there. But things haven't changed even with the clampdown being removed. Now, more and more journalists are fearing reprisal by authorities, themselves summoned at police stations, booked under various cases. They cannot report gun battle sites because that is going to be considered as being anti-national or trying to incite anti-national sentiment. We've had cases of photojournalists whose cameras have been taken away, mobile phones have been taken away. We've had award-winning journalists who have been who have been questioned and taken to the police stations under the anti-terror laws. And this is most disheartening, because the reason that Kashmir and its authorities and the administration gives is that they are promoting secessionism and separatist activities. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. The clampdown there in Kashmir is also worsened because of a new media policy which is going to decide the government, the Directorate of Information is going to decide what is fake news. He's going to decide who's going to be impaneled, who's going to get advertisements. Obviously, the clear move in Kashmir is that they want to make sure that the ground reality does not come out, especially even now in these trying times. As trade unionists, I think what we have done is, and I think what is important, and it is our duty, is that we've always spoken out against each and every single case of harassment and intimidation. And we've demanded that cases be withdrawn. In fact, our union pleaded in the Supreme Court along with the main petitioner, the Kashmir Times editor, when they challenged this clampdown, this communication blockade, because we argued that it was a clear attack on the freedom of press. And as affiliates of the IFJ, it's very important as unions, we are participating in the campaigns. However, I must share my personal anguish, and there is a bit of a lacuna, because when we believe in trade unionism and we believe that our voices are going to be much stronger if we all get together, we unfortunately have not been able to reach out to our journalist organizations in Kashmir to join, whether it is my union or any other national union, because I think it's important that not only do we give them the confidence, but because when they join the union, the national level, we would be able to fight against the brutal power. let me also say, I would like to say that I'm sure it's not going to be any solace to our Kashmir colleagues, but the intimidation and harassment of media and journalists in India in these past, well, I would say 7 years, has grown dangerously. It varies in degrees, be it in the Northeast, where we've had a case where a journalist was in prison under the National Security Act for a whole year. Unions, activists, human rights activists had to campaign to get his release. The largest state of Uttar Pradesh, again a BJP ruled state, has imposed, is filing FIRs left, right, and center against journalists. And this is being seen more in the times of COVID now. We suddenly realize that this clampdown has not, let me say, this clampdown has been marked even during this peaceful protest of farmers. And I must thank the NUGI parliamentary group, which supported our cause as well, where senior journalists were charged with sedition, press freedom has been under question. And now during COVID, journalists, media, which is highlighting the failures of the state administration in handling the pandemic, especially the second wave of the pandemic, which has been catastrophic and which is not really just the virus. It's talking about the system collapsing per se. So here, the journalists we have had cases of over 100 journalists by now who deal with cases. Senior journalists have had to file and have to reach out to lawyers to fight their cases. What we are going through is something which we have never been through before. And I think it's very, very important. As Jeremy, you said, what do we do as unions? We have been raising our voice, but it seems that we have a long battle ahead. And I think the kind of harassment, intimidation that the government has imposed on us has made us more determined. But at the same time, I must say that, and I would like to thank the global support that we in India are getting, especially now in the second wave, where I think the international media has started writing and putting India on the front page of the handling of the COVID situation. We in the union have written to the Prime Minister. We've asked for support for journalists. We've asked all our state unions, many of our state unions across wherever these cases of sedition have taken place, have written, have held protests, and some have been successful in ensuring that their colleagues are set free. I would just end by saying that, well, this fear psychosis that this government, I don't mean alone the central government, but this fear psychosis which is being brought about in the in journalism has made many of our own journalists, impose self-censorship on themselves, because it's very difficult. It's difficult to fight, somebody criticizing your report, and like the olden days, you give out a correction. But when it comes to sedition cases, it's going to be very difficult. And we as a union have also thought in terms of having a welfare fund, starting a welfare fund now, more so, in case we can help our colleagues in fighting these cases. And let me just end. We have to be optimistic. I am rather pessimistic, but I would end on the note that I think that this move by the governments to stifle press freedom, especially during this period of COVID, perhaps is going to make many of us go back and get less fearful and actually report what a lot of us are doing today. Together, I think we will be able to fight this.
Thank you, Sabina, and I am sure that the global family of unions will support you in that fight. Let me try and go back to Turkey and hope that this time we can hear Ayse better. So Ayse, over to you. Let's hope we can hear from you now. If you unmute.
Mute.
There.
Okay, can you hear me like that, or I'll turn off the video?
Yes, that's okay at the moment. If you need to, turn off the video.
You tell me, okay? You're right with me. Because I
Turn
don't
off
know
the video.
Okay,
I'm sorry about the technical issues, but
okay, just a minute. Okay. Now, I hope that's better.
yes.
Well, there are 40 journalists now at present jailed in Turkey, but the names and the numbers are constantly changing, which means that one person goes in, one journalist goes in, another one goes out. Now, so it is never something stable. What we do against this? First thing, we had campaigns, especially before the pandemic, we had campaigns on the courts, on the streets, and now we have social media campaigns about everyone, and especially about the collective executions, where the journalists working in one media, all of them are being executed, are on court and in prison. On the other hand, a new law has passed which forbids anyone, also the citizens, to record any kind of violence by the police, by the soldiers, and by the gendarme against anyone demonstrating on the streets. So if they beat someone up and take him under custody, you can't record that. You can't just take a photo, you can't take a video, even if you're a journalist or a citizen journalist. This is very difficult to cope with, but people don't care about this. They take recordings, they take videos and photographs. There are a few subjects you can't write about. If you write about them, you know that you are in trouble. One is this war in Syria. The other one is the Kurdish conflict. The third one is the corruption of the government. And the fourth one is political conspiracy. Who is doing what with who? If you're writing about it, there's always a broadcasting ban, a publication ban, and if you don't care about this, if you don't act according to this, this means a case and going into the jail. We are trying to give legal support to journalists because there are so many cases and we need so many lawyers and so much legal support. But the thing we have very much difficulty in doing is that we can't hold the track of their conditions in the jail, because they do things like a guy is arrested or a woman is arrested somewhere in the east part of Turkey, and they put him in a prison on the west part of Turkey so that his family or her family has trouble to see and visit them. And it means a lot of money, it means a lot of financial support. This is, and this is something we can't help. We sort of hold a track about this, but this is something we can't help. And there's another thing, there's a very important thing. When the office of a TV channel, independent TV channel, or or internet site, or a newspaper is raided, they break down everything. The police breaks down everything. And even if they didn't break them down, they take everything away. So if you are trying to do something new after this, if for example, the newspaper is closed and you want to have another newspaper, you don't have anything. You don't have anything technical. No cameras, sometimes not even a notebook to take notes with pencil. I'm not talking about a lab digital thing. This financial attack to journalism, to independent journalism, is very important. It is very important for us to have international support, and it is also very important to have international support from countries in Asia and in Africa, from countries other than Europe, because there's all this ideological thing about that the Western countries are trying to interfere with politics in Turkey, and this is something to be against. This is something sort of anti-imperialism. There is this discourse about this. So, but if, for example, if we get a support from Palestine, from India, it is very valuable for us. And of course, we know that many of our colleagues, they have to go to countries in Europe, which is a very difficult choice, because in exile you can't work in your mother tongue, and you can't report, which is, reporting is the basic thing in journalism. You can write your opinion, but you can't report in another country about your country. So they end your profession if you have to go abroad. I try to take my time very and try to be brief, because I also want to hear about Palestine more than anything. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Ayse, and thank you for sticking to the time. And be assured, not only from the IFJ, but from the NUJ, and I'm sure the other unions here, that the solidarity will be there with Turkish journalists who have been through an extremely difficult time over the past few years and continue to face that repression, and we will be standing with you. Colleagues, in the last few days, we have witnessed the bombing of 3 buildings housing media in Gaza, criminal acts which breach international law and are part of a systematic and deliberate targeting of journalists in Palestine. The bombings, of course, are only part of that story. We've seen a wave of arrests of journalists, dozens injured, and today the first death of Yusuf Abu Hussein, killed when his home was bombed. To update us on the grim reality and to call for solidarity, I'm going to welcome Nasser Abu Bakr, a member of the IFJ Executive Committee and President of the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate. Just before Nasser speaks, he will speak in Arabic and there is translation into English. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see the option for interpretation, and you can choose the English channel there, and then you will receive it in English. Nasser, you are very welcome, and we are all in solidarity with you and looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Nasser.
ناصر أبو بكر رئيس اتحاد الصحفيين الفلسطينيين. شكرا لك جيرمي على دعمكم وعلى تضامنكم. My dear colleagues, my very dear colleagues from the IFG, from the UK, from Ireland, all my colleagues and attendees from the press unions and associations all over the world, I welcome you all in my name and the name of the Palestinian Press Association and in the name of all the Palestinian journalists and all the Palestinian detainees and those serving prison terms and the sons and children of the journalists who were killed in the conflict. I also thank the Irish Union for organizing the conference. I also here would like to thank the British Union and the cooperation between our union and the British Union that's built on cooperation, on mutual interest and solidarity. I thank you for your constant support, for your ongoing support to the Palestinian journalists. My dear colleagues, I'm talking to you conference. At the time I'm talking to you, there are Palestinian journalists under attack. As we speak, there are journalists under attack and under fire because of the Israeli war on the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. There are more than 50,000 Palestinians who have been kicked out of their houses in Gaza and the West Bank. I'm talking now today about
تشير إلى ارتكاب دولة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي لأكثر من 4450 اعتداء وجريمة منذ ذلك التاريخ وحتى الآن، أي أن مجزر
Since 10 days, the Israeli occupation authorities have committed a total of 4,450 violations and crimes against persons.
وبين إطلاق نار والتسبب بإعاقات كما حدث مع معاذ عمارنا الذي فقد عينه وأحمد اللوح الذي فقد عينه.
These crimes can be seen were committed in the forms of killing, assassination, and causing disability to journalists. Also, these crimes took the form of destruction of equipment, and the last one was the attack on the CNN crew in Jerusalem, in addition to destroying headquarters. Today, one of our colleagues working in Al-Aqsa broadcast passed away and was killed by the Israeli journalist. Another journalist was killed while sleeping with his children in his house. This brought the total number of Palestinian journalists who was killed since 2000 to 51. And in 10 days, a total of 120 journalists were injured. And today, as we speak, 10 journalists were injured as they were hit by the Israeli occupation authorities. I would like to tell you that we are only a few meters from an Israeli military base in a place called Beit El. I'm talking to you while inhaling the the gas tear fired by the Israeli occupation forces. I'd like to say that since 2013, a number of media organizations have been shut down. There are also still, as we speak, Palestinian journalists under administrative arrest serving prison terms. What is the crimes committed by the acts committed by the Israeli occupation can be elevated to the status of war crime, including recently the attack on the Associated Press and Al Jazeera headquarters in Gaza. And this thing should be, it's a message from us to the whole world that we are being attacked, we are being cracked down on daily basis by the Israeli occupation authorities. We before warned against the attack, the Israeli attack on international press, international media organizations. Today, the Israelis killed our fellow colleague, Yusuf Abu Hussein. Today, he was killed and they left his children orphans. That is our colleague giving live broadcast. My dear colleagues, we warn against the continuation of these crimes against journalists in Palestine. All these crimes should stop. We are in dire need of international efforts. All these crimes should stop, and all those who committed them need to be held accountable in the International Criminal Court. I would like also to highlight and express appreciation for the bilateral relations between the British Press Association and our union, and the most recent one that the notifications they send to the international organizations on the crimes and the violations committed by the Israeli occupations against the Palestinian journalists. In addition to the coordination they built with the International Press Federation and the medical assistance they provide to the Palestinian journalists.
إن كل هذا من خلال نقاشات مفصلة وتخطيط مشترك بين اتحادينا ونحن نشكركم جدا.
We thank you for all your support, the IFJ, for the capacity building program we implemented in cooperation with you, and we hope that and we would like that there is a joint coordination also enhanced between our association and the Irish and the British Press Association to bring an end to the Israeli violations against these journalists, the Palestinian journalists, and conduct reports and on these violations and report these violations to the international bodies working on press freedoms. I hope that we both can ink and sign more cooperation agreements, and I would like to thank you, all of you, and I would like to convey my fellow journalists greetings to you all, and we would like always to thank you and to build constant cooperation with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this gathering, and thank you very much for your support, and I wish that we can launch an international campaign to document the Israeli crimes.
Thank you very much, Nasser, and thank you for the powerful testimony about what's going on and a clear call for international solidarity. And as you know, the IFJ has, with the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate, submitted formal complaints at the United Nations and is also seeking the right to pursue the case of targeting of Palestinian journalists at the International Criminal Court. And can I just also thank the NUJ parliamentary group for the early day motion that they have tabled, I think today, maybe yesterday, deploring the bombing of media houses in Gaza and calling for the Israelis to be held to account for that. So thank you very much, Nasser. Nasser spoke about impunity there as well, and impunity always drives further attacks on journalists. For 30 years or more, the IFJ has documented every single killing of a journalist around the world. And in that time, less than 1 in 10 of those cases have been properly investigated or the perpetrators of it brought to justice. So to talk about the IFJ's new fight against impunity, I'd like to welcome Jim Boumelha, who will be known very well to all NUJ activists and also was formerly IFJ president, currently the IFJ treasurer. Jim. Unmute, unmute. Okay, go ahead.
Jeremy, I've taken 3 minutes of your time. I was saying it's always very difficult to follow Nasser in his powerful speeches, and many thanks to the IFJ for putting such a fantastic panel. But however strong the panel, it barely gives a glimpse of the plight of journalists in so many countries. Would have needed to have over 100 unions speaking to have a precise idea of what's going on globally. And it is not just happening in countries under dictatorship or military rule. If you take democracies such as the USA, the US Press Freedom Tracker, which is a credible tool, documented in 2020 at least 110 journalists arrested or criminally charged in relation to their reporting, and around 300 journalists assaulted, the majority by law enforcement. And there are those in prison and those taken to court and criminalized for what they have written, or those and their families, routinely harassed, and the list is endless. And although we deal with a myriad of shock and horror stories every day, we have always given priority to those who have paid the ultimate price for their work as journalists, those who are killed for their job. The IFJ was the first organization in the world to start monitoring the killing of journalists and media staff some 30 years ago, and publishes a killing list of journalists, what a horrible word, every January the 1st. When commemorating last December, what's happened in the last 30 years, we realized the sheer ordeal that journalists have been going through. And when you took time to look at the detail, you find them shocking. Shocking because so many have died. When you aggregate all the statistics, they add up to no fewer than around 2,700 that have died in this year, an average of about 2 journalists every week. Shocking because many of the murders are local beat reporters whose name don't resonate internationally. These were not top-flight war correspondents who knowingly risk their lives or get caught in crossfire. Every conflict in the world has always claimed its victim among journalists, and the invasion of Iraq alone triggered the killing of over 400 journalists. Shocking when we realize the scale of unresolved journalist murder, a figure which hits as hard as a bullet. The killers get away with murder, and nearly 9 out of 10 cases, and in no less than 89% of journalist murders worldwide, there has been little or no prosecution. Very rarely, triggerman is brought to trial, but the paymaster goes free, making it so easy to silence forever a journalist. Even in war zones, most journalists are murdered in reprisal for what they write, as opposed to being killed by the hazards of combat reporting. In Somalia, more than half of journalists killed didn't die in a fight or in bomb attack. Instead, they were individually murdered. But when you compile a report like this, it's tempting to spend a lot of efforts to analyze all the many patterns and the number crunching and interpreting the graphs, which we do. But there is only one thread. From the massacre of the 30 journalists who were murdered in one instance, in cold blood in Maguindanao in the Philippines 12 years ago, to the current forgotten war in Yemen. The problem of impunity in murdering journalists cuts across geographic and political boundaries, and is perhaps the single greatest threat to the press freedom worldwide. Impunity occurs when there is the absence of political will to back the investigation into the killing of journalists. And it's easy to draw the conclusion that the cause is hopeless and to give up, but we don't. The IFJ and its member unions are engaged every day, holding states responsible for their negligence and in many cases complicit in the murders of journalists. The killed list is indeed our most important tool. It has served us well, and the global community of journalists will ensure it will continue telling the world about what's happening to journalists. But we have other tools too, and I will conclude by citing just a few. One internal tool as trade unionists, solidarity from journalists to journalists, that help us fund the training and safety we give to journalists. We have trained thousands of journalists and also scores of trainers in many countries. And another important and unique tool is our International Safety Fund that Jeremy mentioned, which has been providing emergency humanitarian assistance to journalists, those who need medical attention or help with legal fees, or to flee in the face of dangers, or support their family when they're under the cosh. I'm proud to tell you that the NUJ now contributes yearly to this fund. Most important is our participation at the United Nations and its agencies such as UNESCO to ensure that the plethora of international instruments are strengthened and the laws are being implemented. All these instruments make it clear that journalists, including embedded journalists, are civilian and must therefore be protected as such. They all commit states to refrain from killing, ill treatment, and lawful arrests and other interferences likely to have a chilling effect on all media operators and citizens at large. But we know their weakness, that most are non-binding and that they operate incrementally. And it's clear to everybody that although the problem of impunity is well recognized, the major hindrance for the protection of journalists derive not from the scope of the rights, but from implementation deficits. And this is why we have been lobbying ferociously for the last couple of years for the UN to adopt an international convention on the protection of journalists, a new binding international instrument dedicated to safety of journalists and including a specific enforcement mechanism that would improve the effectiveness of the international response. We are all aware of the mountain we have to climb to achieve this, and it will take us years. But many of our unions have already started helping this work because they know how crucial this will be for the protection of journalists. Journalists, in particular those working in dangerous conditions, feel embedded by the very international institution created to protect their rights and sometimes by their employers. And it's left to us, our organization, to speak out forcefully and push back against member states that seek to block international institutions from fulfilling their mandate and enforcing international law. This will continue to do day in, day out, and we welcome the engagement of you all to help us bring an end to impunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim, for that whistle-stop tour of all the work that the IFJ does around safety of journalists and tackling impunity. And on the front of of the IFJ website, you can find out much more about the work that we're doing there on tackling impunity. I want to finish this panel on a positive note. In the UK, I remember when we watched in horror in 2007, 2008, when tens of thousands of media jobs were being lost in the US as a result of austerity, recession, and corporate interests were buying up media and cutting journalism. We in the UK at that time suffered not long afterwards. Now in the US, as a result of a strong organizing culture and active campaigning, the US media is seeing an unprecedented wave of unionization. And here to briefly explain why and how is Jon Schleuss, the president of the US News Guild CWA. Jon, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy. Thank you for the NUJ for having me as well. It's good to be on a panel with such an amazing group. And I'd just like to start out by saying that our union, which represents journalists across the United States and Canada, Nasser, stands in solidarity with all the journalists in Palestine. We condemn the violence that Israel is inflicting on the Palestinian people, and specifically by targeting journalists. We're calling on the Biden administration here in the United States to push the Israeli government to immediately stop the bloodshed. The News Guild was founded more than 80 years ago. We started as the American Newspaper Guild. Currently, we represent 25,000 members in media organizations, along with nonprofit, union, and other activist staffers as well, who have organized with us. We include CWA Canada, which is separately a member of the IFJ. The publications and the workers at the different publications that we represent include the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, BuzzFeed News, more than about 300 different organizations. But we also include very small publications in states folks probably don't even know about, like Montana and Wyoming, where we have 8 to 12 different members who've organized in places that are not normally where you think the labor movement is alive and well. I joined the movement myself back in 2016. For folks who remember, 2016 was an election year, a rather pivotal one for the United States, when Donald Trump was elected to office. In December, a month after that election, me and my colleagues at the Los Angeles Times kicked off a unionization effort that took us about a year underground to form internal solidarity and to build up the support to launch a successful union campaign at a publication that had never seen a union in its newsroom in more than 136 years. And one of the reasons that we created that was really to have a voice, and was to apply the ethics that we have and we use as journalists into our own organizations and into not only the companies, but also directly into our democracy, so that we can protect it as stewards of our democracy. During the Trump administration, as Jim pointed out, there was direct targeting of journalists. Trump called journalists the enemy of the people, when in reality, we are the ones who are providing a voice and a watchdog to corporate influences and corrupt governments. We are also seeing, even currently under the Biden administration, police targeting media and journalists directly when they cover protests. After the murder of George Floyd and the protests that followed, police would turn their rubber bullet guns and turn their tear gas canisters onto members of the media and directly injure them only as recently as the last 3 weeks. All of that, of course, is illegal under US law, but police are acting in that accord anyway. So we're standing up and fighting against that. And the positive note here is the idea that when we stand together, we truly can be strong. And when we fight, we can win. In the past 5 years, more than 80 different news organizations have unionized, representing about 4,000 workers. That's an increase in our union in the United States by more than 1/3 in that short time span. The examples include not only the LA Times, as I mentioned, but also New York Magazine, the Chicago Tribune, NBC Digital, the Dallas Morning News in Texas, where we haven't represented workers in a large way since the 1990s. The New Yorker Magazine, the Virginian Pilot, the Arizona Republic, Wirecutter, Miami Herald, Omaha World Herald, Wired Magazine. So many different publications and workers have formed unions. And even just yesterday, we sort of have an internal joke that every other day we have another union campaign going public. It about feels like that every week. And just yesterday, we had workers at Forbes go public announcing more than 80% of them have signed on in support of forming the union. And whether the company wants to voluntarily accept us or push us and fight us to an election where our win rate is 100% and we win with 95% yes votes, because journalists want that voice. And they want to save their jobs. As Jeremy referenced, since actually the 2008-9 recession, we have lost half of the jobs at newspapers across the United States, 50% just sliced off. And those aren't expanding into TV or radio or online publications at a fast enough rate to replace those journalists. We're losing journalists at the local level. It is creating what is called news deserts, which you are probably experiencing in other places as well, where we don't have enough local voices to cover local issues. And it's necessary because at the local level, no matter whether you're in Montana or in Arkansas or in Namibia, like, you need journalists there to be watchdogs on the local government as well. Journalists are organizing to have a voice, to be able to use their voice at the bargaining table, to create contract language to help safeguard their jobs, because we know that the industry is very competitive and very difficult. They're organizing because of our ethics, to seek truth and report it, to minimize the harm and pain inflicted on our colleagues when they are paid less because of the color of their skin or of their gender. We are organizing for diversity and inclusion and equity, because if we don't have that in our own organizations, we do not have that when we are going out to report on what is happening in our world. We're organizing because our market is rapidly consolidating, where you have just a few corporate players controlling almost all of media. And in some countries, that is really bad. It is getting worse in the United States. And it is being controlled more and more by hedge funds, which are sort of these shell financial entities that just want to extract out wealth and not actually invest in the work that we do. We are so happy last year to rejoin IFJ after being gone for too long. I became president about 1.5 years ago, and I'm very happy that we were able to rejoin the IFJ and become part of an international solidarity, because we have a duty, right? We have a duty to protect democracies across the world, because we can't rely on government to do it. We can't. We have to do it through voice and through transparency and through the fights. And when we organize, we do win. Our goal is to organize every single media worker in the United States and in Canada. And I know that we can do that. And I know that we can take that fight to an international level as well. Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy. And again, shukran, Nasser. And thank you so much for all the work that IFJ and NUJ is doing.
Thank you so much for that. For John, I can only echo the comment that Tim Dawson, I think, has just put on the chat, that he'd be happy to listen to you reading out the list of papers at which you've mounted successful campaigns for the rest of the evening. We're more than happy to do that. And when you talk about, it seems like every other day there's an organizing campaign. When our communications department say, do we have any union victories for the newsletter this week? I say, yes, but they're afraid they're all from the US again at the moment. So thank you for the work that you're doing there. I mean, what the News Guild are doing is very inspirational for others to understand that when we do that organizing work, we can be successful in building strong unions. I sent a quick private message just to make sure that we could carry on for another 5 to 10 minutes maximum, since we've run over time because of the few technical difficulties we had. So we have a question, but it's probably a question targeted more at me than the panel, but asking from Barry White, asking about the Media Freedom Coalition, which was set up in London in July 2019 at the Global Conference for Media Freedom, and that it was set up to defend media freedom wherever it is under threat. And Barry asks, how effective is the coalition, and what pressures can the IFJ and NUJ put on this organization to highlight the attacks on media workers and their right to report in Turkey and elsewhere, and take action to defend media freedom? I say it's probably for me because for the International Federation of Journalists, I sit on its civil society advisory network. And to give you an idea of how effective it is, all the civil society organizations last year threatened to pull out of it because it had done absolutely nothing and was not even issuing statements about media freedom when journalists had been killed or journalists had been arrested. We have been able to bring more pressure to bear on it, but it is to a large extent at this stage a vanity project of those governments who are involved in it, and the pressures that we can put on it to make sure that it can maybe do more work is to ensure that we are each with our own governments raising these issues and putting pressure on our own governments, because the people who sit on that panel are all representatives of their government. So the key thing is for the NUJ to ensure the UK government, who are one of the leading countries in that Media Freedom Coalition, are serious about taking up the issues of media freedom. I don't know if we have any other questions, or whether any of the panelists in particular wanted to come back on anything that's been said or add anything. I see there's a lot of important messages going out in the chat as well. Yeah, Jim Boumelha just mentioned as well how Ireland's played a huge role at the UN to help with putting the question of impunity on the UN agenda, and we're very grateful for the work that NUJ members in Ireland have done to push their government to be at the forefront of that as well. If I don't have any other questions coming in, then I am going to thank all the panelists. I'm sure that their contributions have provoked a spirit of solidarity in you, and that you will go and find out more about the various disputes, the various cases, the various threats, the organising campaigns that those unions are involved in. And if you need more information about any of those campaigns, then you can go to the IFJ website, to our Twitter, our Facebook page, where you can find out more about all of those. Or if you can't find it, then feel free to email me or email the IFJ. We will discuss with the NUJ ways we can make available more information and resources for you. And once again, let me thank everyone at the NUJ at all levels for its wonderful international solidarity. It's an inspiration to our other unions, and I wish NUJ colleagues a successful conference over the next few days. So to all of you, stay safe, thank you, and have a good conference.